The hidden truth behind the smile. The crowd inside the studio clapped wildly as the lights dimmed and the theme music for the late-night show played. People had lined up for hours just to see Keanu Reeves in person. Everyone knew him as the kind, humble movie star with a mysterious past, the man who rode subways, gave away millions, and never raised his voice. But no one that night expected what he was about to reveal. The stage lit up in a flash, and Jimmy Fallon danced out with his usual charm. He cracked a few jokes, the audience laughed, and cameras panned across smiling faces. Then, with a dramatic pause, Jimmy said, "Ladies and gentlemen, the one and only Keanu Reeves." Keanu walked out slowly, wearing a simple black jacket and jeans, no designer logos, no flashy entrance, just him. People stood and clapped even louder. But if someone had looked closely, really closely, they would have seen something strange. His smile didn't reach his eyes. He sat down, nodding politely to Jimmy, then looked out at the crowd like he was searching for something or someone. Jimmy jumped into the usual questions about movies, stunts, and memes. Keanu played along at first. He smiled, made a quiet joke that had the crowd giggling. But then, when Jimmy asked him about a recent award, everything shifted. "You always seem so grounded," Jimmy said. "You've seen so much success, yet you stay humble. What's the secret, man?" Keanu paused. A long, strange silence filled the studio. He looked down at his hands, rubbed his fingers together like they were remembering something. Then, he leaned in toward Jimmy and whispered a sentence so soft that the microphones almost missed it. Jimmy blinked, his smile freezing. "She never got to see me make it," Keanu said. The words hung in the air like smoke after a fire. Jimmy leaned back, confused. "Wait, who?" But Keanu didn't answer. Not right away. Instead, he looked into the camera. Not at it, but into it, like he knew someone out there was watching. Someone who mattered. The audience grew silent. The laughter was gone. Something had shifted. People stopped checking their phones. They leaned in. They could feel it. Something real was happening, and it was nothing like the show's usual script. Finally, Keanu spoke again, slowly, his voice cracking just a little. "I was 17. She used to stay up all night sewing clothes to pay our rent. Never complained, never asked for anything. But the week I got my first big acting job, she collapsed in the kitchen, brain aneurysm, gone in hours." He looked down again, and for a moment, the unshakable Keanu Reeves looked like a man barely holding it together. Jimmy didn't know what to say. He opened his mouth, then closed it. He looked at his producers off camera, unsure whether to continue the interview or cut to commercial. But Keanu wasn't finished. "I promised her I'd take her to the premiere. I promised I'd fly her to Paris when I made it big." But she never even saw the trailer. You could hear people sniffling in the crowd. One woman put her hand over her mouth, eyes wide. Someone whispered, "Oh my God." Keanu looked up again. "So when people say I'm humble, it's because success without someone to share it with is just noise." Jimmy wiped his eye discreetly. He tried to lighten the mood. "Man, I didn't expect this tonight." But Keanu nodded and smiled. "Me neither." Just as the crew prepared to move on, something odd happened. Jimmy's producer signaled for the commercial break, but Jimmy raised his hand. He waved it off. He turned to Keanu and said, "Wait, what was the last thing you told her?" Keanu looked at him, and for a few seconds, he didn't speak. The entire studio held its breath. Even the camera crew froze, unsure whether to keep filming or lower the boom. Then, he said, "I told her I'd never forget where I came from. And I never did." The lights dimmed slightly. Jimmy sat back in his chair, stunned. The screen behind them flickered, showing a photo of a tired woman in her 30s standing behind a teenage Keanu. She had dark circles under her eyes, but her smile was soft, proud. She wore a faded sweater, and in her hand was a tiny note folded a dozen times. Jimmy turned to the audience, visibly shaken. "We're going to take a break," he said softly. "But we'll be right back. Don't go anywhere." But the crowd knew something had changed. Keanu had turned a light-hearted show into something sacred. And somewhere, behind the cameras, a woman clutched her chest and whispered, "He's telling the truth." What she knew, and what the world was about to find out, would change everything. The woman behind the curtain as the commercials played silently across millions of screens. Backstage was anything but quiet. The stage manager kept checking his watch, muttering about timing. The producers huddled in a corner, whispering fast and nervous. None of them had expected the interview to turn this emotional, this raw. But in a dim corner, near the edge of the curtain, an older woman stood frozen, her hand still pressed to her chest. She wasn't part of the crew. She wasn't listed on the guest list. Her clothes were plain, an old navy coat worn at the sleeves, a scarf knitted by hand. People had passed her all day, thinking she was someone's assistant, or maybe just another fan. But her eyes never left Keanu once he walked on stage. When he had whispered that one sentence to Jimmy, her whole body had stiffened like she'd been struck by lightning. Her name was Anna, and she had waited over 20 years for this moment. Long ago, Anna had worked the night shift at a quiet rehab center just outside of Toronto. Most of the patients were elderly, tired souls recovering from surgeries or struggling with forgotten memories. But there had been one young woman, a tailor, they said, who had collapsed suddenly, no known family nearby. Her name was Patricia Reeves. Anna had been there when Patricia arrived, unconscious and pale. A folded piece of paper clenched so tightly in her hand that it took 2 nurses and a metal tray to gently loosen her fingers. They never opened it. They just tucked it beside her hospital bed, thinking maybe it was nothing. But Anna remembered the night she woke briefly, her eyes fluttering open just once. She didn't speak. Her lips moved, and Anna leaned close, trying to understand. Only one name came out in a dry whisper. "Keanu." Then she slipped away. The machines made a single sharp tone. The doctors rushed in, but it was too late. Anna had gone home that morning with the folded paper still in her bag. She had meant to give it to the hospital staff. But something about that whisper, that single name, haunted her. She read the note instead. It was a letter. A mother's final words to her son. Full of simple things, reminders to eat well, to stay kind, to trust his heart, not the world. And at the end, a line that made Anna cry right there in her kitchen. "Even if I'm not there to see you rise, I already know you will. And when you do, remember this, you are not alone." Anna had searched for years. She wrote letters to agencies, tried to reach managers, even left messages with studios. But no one believed her. No one responded. And slowly, she gave up. Until 2 nights ago, when she saw the promo for the late-night show. Keanu Reeves was going to be there. Something inside her told her this was her moment. So she booked a bus. She waited in line with the rest. And now, with the interview shaking the studio and the nation watching, she finally had proof. Anna stepped out from behind the curtain just as the cameras came back on. Jimmy noticed her first. He squinted, confused, then whispered to a producer. Keanu looked over too, and when his eyes met Anna's, something deep inside him stirred. He didn't recognize her face, but the folded note in her hand, that he knew. The same note he had tucked in his mother's coat pocket the night she collapsed. Jimmy stood up. Can we help you, ma'am?" Anna's voice trembled as she spoke. I think I have something that belongs to him." Keanu rose slowly, unsure. He walked over to her, and she held out the note. For a second, he just stared. Then, carefully, like touching a sacred relic, he took it. He unfolded it with shaking hands. The audience couldn't see the words, but they saw his face. His eyes filled. His knees gave slightly, and he grabbed the edge of the chair for balance. He whispered one word under his breath. "Mom." The room fell into silence again. Anna placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. "She wanted you to know. You were never alone." Keanu sat back down, note clutched in his hand, unable to speak. And on every screen watching at home, people felt it. Something real, something rare. But what no one yet knew was that Anna had only given him the first part of the letter, and the second part, still folded in her coat, held a truth so personal, so unbelievable, that even Keanu wasn't ready for it. The second half of the letter, when the show wrapped and the applause faded into low murmurs, Keanu stayed seated long after the cameras stopped rolling. The audience was gently ushered out, some in tears, others in stunned silence, their laughter and excitement replaced by something heavier, deeper. No one expected to witness something like this on a comedy talk show. And no one left the same. Anna sat beside him in the empty studio, her hands folded in her lap like someone waiting in a church pew. For a while, they didn't speak. The silence wasn't awkward. It was sacred, like they were both standing on a line between the past and the present, afraid to step too quickly in either direction. Keanu finally turned to her, the folded note still clutched in his fingers. It was worn, yellowed with time, the creases deep and permanent. His voice was almost a whisper. "How did you get this?" Anna looked at him, her eyes soft but tired, like someone who had carried too much for too long. "I was with her, in the final hours. She never woke up fully, but she whispered your name. I never forgot it." Keanu lowered his gaze. "I've spent so many nights wondering what her last words were." "Then you deserve to know the rest," she said gently. From her coat pocket, she pulled out another folded paper, smaller, thinner, but the same handwriting. She hesitated, holding it out like an offering that could change everything. She wrote it after she arrived at the hospital. No one saw her write it. "I only found it days later, tucked into the seam of the hospital blanket. Like she hid it on purpose." Keanu took it slowly. As he unfolded the paper, something inside him braced. His heart beat faster. Not from fear, but from the ache of old. Wounds being touched again. He read it once in silence. Then again, his face changed. Not with sorrow, but with something else. Confusion, then disbelief, and finally a silent kind of awe. He lowered the paper to his lap, staring into space. Anna waited patiently. She didn't press. She knew that kind of truth needed to settle, before it could be spoken aloud. Finally, Keanu whispered, "She lied to protect me." Anna nodded. Yes. The second note revealed a truth that even Keanu hadn't known. His mother had hidden her illness for months. She had known something was wrong. The headaches, the vision changes, the dizzy spells. She had gone to doctors alone and received the diagnosis. But she refused to tell him. She didn't want her sickness to hold him back. The letter described how proud she was, how she'd watched him from the shadows, slipping into the back of acting classes, reading his scripts when he wasn't looking, smiling quietly from the doorway when he practiced in the mirror. She saw everything. And when she collapsed that final night, she had already written goodbye. But at the end of the letter, one final line broke him. "I didn't want you to carry my pain, so I buried it. But if this letter ever finds you, know this, I believed in you even before you believed in yourself." Keanu stood slowly, the note pressed against his chest. He walked toward the center of the empty stage and looked out at the vacant audience seats. All those faces from earlier, all the strangers clapping and cheering. They were gone now. But in his mind, he imagined one woman sitting in the front row, smiling, silent, proud. Anna stepped beside him, and for the first time, he saw her. Not just as a stranger, but as someone who had carried a piece of his soul for decades. "Why did you wait all these years?" he asked gently. Her voice cracked. "Because I didn't think the world would believe me. But when you whispered that, sentenced tonight, I knew it was time." Keanu reached out and held her hand. No cameras, no audience. Just a man and a woman sharing a truth buried in silence for too long. But outside the studio, a different kind of storm was beginning. News of the interview had spread like fire. Millions were already watching the clips online. Headlines were exploding. People were dissecting every word he said, and among them, a man with a secret of his own, a name tied to the hospital records, someone who had been watching Keanu from afar for years, waiting for the right time to step forward. And now he knew the moment had come. The man in the photograph. The rain began to fall softly over New York as Keanu stepped out of the studio, the city lights glowing behind a haze of mist and quiet thunder. People moved past him on the sidewalk without a second glance. They didn't expect to see a world-famous actor walking alone, hunched slightly, clutching two pieces of paper like they were the most precious things he owned. He didn't wave. He didn't smile. He just walked, slow, deliberate steps toward a destination even he hadn't chosen yet. Anna had gone her way, disappearing into the crowd as silently as she had arrived. She didn't ask for anything in return. No photos, no interviews, no thank you. Just a nod and a quiet, "She'd be proud of you." It was the kind of goodbye that didn't feel final, but it carried weight, like a chapter closing, not a book. Keanu checked into a small hotel near Central Park. No paparazzi followed him. No fans screamed his name. He kept his head down, used a false name, and disappeared into the quiet room with its peeling wallpaper and warm lamplight. He didn't want luxury. Not tonight. He needed silence. Space. He sat by the window, unfolded both letters again, and laid them side by side on the table. They looked so small, almost fragile, and yet they held more of his life than any script or trophy ever had. Hours passed. But somewhere across the city, another man stared at a completely different set of papers. An old photograph, a hospital, form, and a letter he'd never dared send. His name was Elliot. He was 60 now, wore glasses that slipped down his nose and a silver ring on his left hand he hadn't removed since 1983. His apartment was filled with boxes, all carefully labeled. Records, archive, letters never sent. It looked like a museum dedicated to memories no one wanted anymore. He sat at his desk, trembling slightly, the photograph in his hand fading around the edges. In it stood a young woman, Patricia. And beside her, a man in his early 20s, arm around her shoulder, eyes soft with something more than friendship, Elliot. They had met when she came to volunteer at the same rehabilitation clinic he worked in. He was drawn to her quiet strength, the way she never complained even when she was exhausted, the way she looked people in the eyes, even when they had nothing left. They had been close, closer than anyone knew. And though he never said it aloud, she had taken his heart and never given it back. When she left suddenly, claiming she had to focus on her son's dreams, Elliot understood. Barely. But he didn't chase her. He thought she'd return when things settled. She didn't. The next time he heard about her, it was through hospital records. She had listed no emergency contacts, no father for her child. But someone had written his name in pencil beside her file, and he never understood why. Until now, the moment he saw Keanu on the show, whispering about a woman who stayed up sewing clothes, who never saw him succeed, who collapsed in a kitchen and left with a folded note. Elliot froze. Everything clicked. He pulled out the one letter Patricia had left him years before, the one he had never opened. With trembling hands, he unfolded it. Inside was a line that made his knees go weak. "I told you once I had a reason for pushing you away. Now you know his name." Elliot dropped the paper. Tears spilled down his cheeks, as decades of silence turned into one unbearable truth. He had a son, and that son had just unknowingly spoken about him in front of millions. But Elliot knew this truth wasn't his to take lightly. It wasn't something to post about or profit from. If anything, he had waited too long. But something in his chest refused to let it go. He had to try. He opened his laptop, searched for the studio's public email. Then he wrote, "To Mr. Keanu Reeves, I believe I knew your mother, and I believe there's more you deserve to know. I'm not asking for anything. Just a moment to talk. I've kept something for a long time, and I think it belongs to you now." He hesitated before clicking send. But something, faith, guilt, hope, guided his finger. Across the city, in the dim hotel room, Keanu's phone buzzed softly on the nightstand. He almost didn't look at it, but when he finally did and saw the subject line, his breath caught. "About your mother," from Elliot. The room seemed to shrink around him. Time slowed. He didn't know the name, but he felt it in his chest. Before his mind could catch up, the past was no longer done with him. The face behind the silence, Keanu sat motionless on the edge of the hotel bed, the phone still glowing in his hand. The message from Elliot was short, respectful, and strangely calm, but it hit like a thunderclap. For a long time, he didn't move. He didn't blink. He just read it over and over, his eyes tracing each word like they might change if he looked hard enough. Outside, the city breathed its usual midnight rhythm. Horns in the distance, the hum of tired buses, the occasional shout from a late-night wanderer. But inside that room, time had fractured. It was no longer about now. It was about everything before. He remembered a box his mother once kept hidden on the highest shelf in their old apartment. As a child, he had tried to reach it more than once, but she always stopped him gently. "Some stories aren't ready yet," she'd whisper, and smile with a sadness he couldn't understand at the time. Years later, after she passed, the box vanished. He never saw it again. What if this man, Elliot, was one of those stories? Keanu typed a reply, paused, deleted it. Then again. What do you say to a stranger who claims to have known your mother better than you did? What do you say to a ghost dressed in flesh and memory? Eventually, he wrote back only 2 words. "Where tomorrow?" The reply came within minutes. "The bench by the lake in Central Park, just after dawn. Morning came too soon. The air was cold, the sky washed in muted blue, and the trees stood bare, their branches like open hands reaching for something long gone." Keanu walked without bodyguards, without cameras, without noise. Just him and the folded letters in his coat pocket. He wore the same jacket from the night before. It smelled faintly of rain and old cologne, his father's scent, though he'd never known it. He saw the man as he approached the lake, a figure sitting perfectly still on a worn, wooden bench. His coat was gray, his shoulders slightly hunched. He looked older than Keanu expected, but something in the way he held himself felt familiar. Even before their eyes met, Elliot stood slowly. Neither of them spoke at first. Then, quietly, Elliot said, "You look just like her when you're thinking." Keanu stopped in his tracks. "You knew her?" he asked, voice tight. Elliot nodded. "I knew her heart, and I knew when it broke." They sat, side by side, the bench creaking beneath their weight. Birds circled above the lake, and the wind moved the water in gentle waves. Elliot pulled something from his coat pocket, a photograph. He passed it to Keanu with both hands. It was old, faded. His mother, young, her arm looped through Elliot's. They were laughing, carefree, alive in a way Keanu had only imagined her. "She never told me about you," Keanu said, barely above a whisper. "And she never told me about you. Until it was too late." Elliot's voice cracked. He pulled off his glasses, rubbed his eyes. I found out from the records. A year after she passed. I asked the hospital to send me whatever they had. I don't know why. Maybe I knew. Deep down. But the moment I saw your name, your birth date, I knew. Keanu looked at the photo again, but his mind was swimming. Why didn't you come sooner? Elliot sighed. Because I thought you didn't need me. You had already become the man she hoped you'd be. What right did I have to interrupt that? A long silence fell between them. Then Keanu turned, looked Elliot in the eye and said, "But you were there, back then." "I was." Elliot nodded, his voice now a mix of regret and reverence. "I wanted more, but she said your dream had to come first. She was afraid the world would crush you if she let anything get in your way. She never needed to carry it alone," Keanu murmured. "But she always did." Elliot placed a hand on the bench between them, a silent offering, not of apology but of presence. "She left one more thing," he said, "something I kept all these years. She made me promise not to open it. It was meant for you. One day." From inside his coat he took a small envelope. It was sealed, the edges browned, and the front read only one word: "Son." Keanu took it with both hands, slowly, like accepting a memory still warm with breath. He didn't open it. Not yet. He simply stared at it, as though the paper might pulse. He knew he wasn't just holding his mother's words now, he was holding her final voice. And as he tucked the envelope into his coat, he looked at Elliot, not with anger, not with confusion, but something like quiet forgiveness. But as they stood and prepared to part ways, neither of them noticed the figure sitting under the trees, watching from a distance. A tabloid photographer. And by sunset, the entire world would know that Keanu Reeves had just met a man who might be his father. The letter, the storm, and the silence that followed, the news exploded before the sun even touched the skyline. Headlines blared across every platform. Keanu Reeves meets mystery man, rumored father. Within hours, photos surfaced of him and Elliot on the park bench, side by side, the envelope clearly visible between them. The quiet meeting had become a public spectacle. Keanu didn't speak to the press. He didn't make a statement. He simply disappeared again, slipping through the noise like smoke. But inside his hotel room, he stared at the envelope marked "Son" for hours, its weight growing heavier the longer he waited. He didn't open it right away. Something in him was afraid, not of what it would say, but of what it might do to the wall he had built inside himself, the wall that had held his grief, his memories, his longing, for decades. But when night fell, and the city softened into shadow, he finally lit the small desk lamp and broke the seal with trembling hands. The letter inside was written in ink that had slightly smudged at the corners, but the handwriting was his mother's. Elegant, soft, each word etched with care. "My dear boy, if you are reading this, then the story has reached you in ways I never could. I was never brave enough to explain it in life, so I leave it in your hands with love." Elliot was not just someone who loved me. He was the only person who ever saw me fully, my struggle, my strength, my fear. He knew the road would be hard, and he offered to carry part of the weight. But I was scared, Keanu. Scared that having both of us chasing dreams would take too much from you, so I chose to carry the silence instead. Maybe I was wrong. Maybe I denied you something precious. But I never wanted you to grow up confused or pulled in two directions. I wanted your future to be free. And yet, if he has found you now, then perhaps the time has come to forgive the silence. You carry so much in your heart, son. The world sees your face and calls you strong, but I know better. I know the boy who cried quietly, who kept his dreams folded like secrets, who never wanted to burden anyone. That boy was already a man, and I loved him more than the world could ever understand. If you find Elliot, and if you choose to open your heart, know this: he is not perfect, but he tried. And in the end, that matters more than anything. Love doesn't need to be loud. Sometimes it's a letter left behind. Sometimes it's a hand held once. Sometimes it's silence, full of things unsaid. But always, it is yours. With all that I was, and all that you became, Mom. Keanu folded the letter carefully, not to hide it, but as if returning a heartbeat to its resting place. Tears streamed silently down his cheeks. Not the kind that needed attention, but the kind born from years of quiet longing finally finding their voice. He didn't cry because he was broken. He cried because he was healing. The following morning, Keanu stood once more at the lake bench, this time holding 2 cups of coffee. Elliot was already there, waiting. When their eyes met, nothing needed to be said. He handed Elliot the cup and sat beside him. They spoke quietly. Not about the headlines, not about the world's noise, but about a woman they both loved differently and fully, about her laugh, her stubbornness, her quiet dignity. She'd be rolling her eyes at all this attention, Keanu said with a soft smile. Elliot chuckled. She never liked being the center of anything. Except our hearts, Keanu added. They sat until the sun rose high, until strangers walked by and barely noticed them. 2 men sharing coffee, not fame, not past, just presence. As the world moved around them, Keanu looked to the sky, then closed his eyes. He didn't feel broken anymore. He felt whole in a way he hadn't known he was missing. The silence inside him was still there, but now it was peaceful. Not empty. Weeks passed. The buzz died down. People moved on to other stories. But in one quiet corner of a bookshop, Keanu left something behind. An envelope, placed gently inside a copy of a poetry collection his mother once loved. On the front, written in soft pencil, it said, "To the next son searching for his mother's voice, keep listening, she's always there." And he walked out, the bell above the door chiming softly behind him. No cameras followed. No crowd waited. Just a man, walking into the world, finally lighter.